Welcome to the EV Ready podcast, featuring industry leaders and their perspectives on electrification, hosted by EV Ready Energy.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the EV Ready podcast. We're changing it up today. We're going to do it a little bit differently. You've got my ugly mug to look at, along with Chris and our guest, Jon Frederick from Car Dealership Guy. I think it's going to be a fun one. It's going to be relaxed and very conversational, and I'm really looking forward to it. So let's get to it. Jon, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're here today?
Hey, thanks so much for having me on the show today. I was in-store guy for about 10 years with the Coons Group in DC. I was a vendor with a cool startup at the time called Auto Lead Star that became Full Path. And then I was kind of first guy to work with Yossi Levy at Car Dealership Guy. And I was with Yossi in the early days. He's still with Yos. And we built Car Dealership Guy together. He obviously was all the content. I was kind of the other side of the house. But Yossi and I have had a really cool journey building Car Dealership.
Yeah, I can tell you've had some fun, like genuinely making the most of it.
Yes. I mean, it's like, it really has been an opportunity for testing creativity and putting new products into market, and you get instant feedback and, finding product market fits. Kind of the most fun I've ever had in my life.
Yeah, super cool when it works. You and I had a chance to speak ahead of this podcast where I just I treasured some time with you, getting to know you and digging a little deeper into your past. And you shared with me something really poignant, just sort of about a life event that changed maybe the trajectory of where you were, where you are today. And I'm curious if you're willing to share that.
Yeah, I was a young guy in the Coons Group right out of Clemson. I started selling cars up in DC, Northern Virginia, and I was at this store that was rocking and rolling. We do just I would sell like 1,000 cars a month. And I had a great opportunity with the organization. I was blessed to be there. I knew the Coons family and kind of had a bit of a fast track. And I was the kind of guy who'd work 6 days a week, and I'd get in early and I'd stay late. And the juice was worth the squeeze because I was like ascending in this automotive group and, checking off my goals. And my wife was working at Price Waterhouse right next to us in Tyson's Corner. So we would it was looking back is like a psychotic point of our lives. We'd meet for dinner at 10:30 every night at Clyde's in Tyson's Corner. But we were both really working hard, her in kind of M&A and me in automotive. And then, I finally get to be a GSM of a Toyota store, and that's kind of, life ambition. I've hit 26 years old, making a bunch of money, and my hard work's paying off. And then out of nowhere, I had a seizure, and it was really shocking. And I had this medical diagnosis that was I actually had a doctor tell me I had a brain tumor, and it was just gutting. And he told me it would, take months of imaging and possible surgery. And, I was a healthy guy. I ran, I was an athlete, and I didn't even really drink that much. But that morning I woke up in the hospital after the seizure. The doctor was like, dude, you're working a little too much. You can never drink. He's like, if you have this capability, you can never have a drink of alcohol. And I was like, okay. And yeah, I honestly haven't had a drink since. But the peculiarity of it all is you wake up in a hospital room and the important things in your life are just clearly sorted for you. It's no longer oh, I want to be the owner of a dealership, or I want to be this or that. I remember thinking, holy shit, I want to go fly fish to every place in the Pacific Ocean. I want to go surf somewhere. And, my wife and I had this opportunity to really stack rank what's important to each other. And then right on the heels of that, my wife got pregnant with her first child. And we quickly found ourselves living at the beach in Jacksonville. And I kind of abandoned world's greatest career prospect. And then upon landing in Jacksonville, I got a clean bill of health by the grace of God. So I'm perfectly fine. but just kind of like crumpled up a career and threw it in the trash can. And I've been hell-bent on not letting my time in the dealership go to waste.
How long ago was this?
It was 2016. So we were married Caitlin and I were married in 2015. We did first anniversary at Greenbrier in West Virginia, kind of big blowout weekend. And then coming back from it that night, so it was like September 13th or 12th. It was that night in 2016.
Wow. I thank you for sharing the story. Those are stories that I need to hear sometimes. So I appreciate you sharing it. I have a 1-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 5-year-old, and obviously with like a startup, which is what we are, we end up working a lot and have to make the decision between spending time with the family and trying to build the company. And I need to hear those stories. So thank you for sharing. Glad things are better now.
But I don't even think it's like the working. It like, I do think, Chris, I got bad news. Like, you and I are addicted to the game of business or whatever it is we're doing. Like, if you can ever find something that draws your attention, like my wife said that to me a long time ago. She was like, you're not addicted to the hours. You're not addicted to being somewhere. You're just addicted to like the game of it. And I think that's true. And
it's
like,
not fun.
It's really fun. And like, whether we're in the showroom, because I know you did your time in the Tesla showroom, whether you're in the showroom or I'm here at like my home office, we're the same kind of like crazy person. But whenever you find an opportunity, as I'm sure you have with EV Ready or I have with Car Dealership Guy, like you almost can't step away from it.
Yeah. The nice thing is for EV Ready, the way we started it was with people that we all cared about, that we were really close to. So we've always had like a really good culture. We always talk about that, like as we continue to grow, not to lose the culture, because it started with family. And so, it doesn't feel like work, which is good.
I was surprised to hear, Chris, that you didn't like have an engineering background in college, but then kind of like your time in, the Tesla, or kind of like the charging company, the solar company, then the Tesla showroom kind of gave you that organic background experience that like, I really related to that, because it seems like you're like, I will not let this thing go to waste that I have discovered to be valuable.
Yeah. You know what? When people say that I'm an engineer, I'm like secretly honored. Like I've been going home to my wife, our whole relationship, like someone asked me if I was an engineer today. Because I'm totally not that. I think for me, like it all started, I don't know, like if you played Madden when you were younger, but Madden like 2004 and Madden 2005, they used to have franchise mode.
And I was really had Ray Lewis on the cover. I think it was the last one I bought.
04 was Vic. I think 06 was McNabb. And I was really good. Like I was, but they used to have like the Madden bus. Like I used to play against those guys.
Nice.
Yeah. But they had the franchise mode. And for me, I like didn't enjoy playing against the computer in franchise mode. What I enjoyed doing was like building the franchise and, and drafting the team and then trading for players. And like, that was like I didn't know it at the time, obviously, but I would finish 30-year franchise modes like every 2 weeks.
Did you simulate the games? Did you ever get to that creepy point of your life where you didn't even play the games?
Oh yeah. Because I could beat all Madden pretty easily. So what I would do is I would like click, I think I had PlayStation at that time. So I would click X to hike the ball. Yeah. And if you don't take control, the computer will just play out the scenario based on what the skill sets of the players are. So I'd pick the plays and then I would just let it kind of play out, and whatever the reality was, and the game would end, and I would, go into general manager mode.
Yeah.
So I think I've always kind of had it in my blood. I just didn't realize it until I was so bad at accounting that I had to quit it.
That's like a peculiar optimization obsession. That's like, you can't even, like, the game's no longer there. You just like making better.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, totally. It was great.
When I started working with Chris, the first thing he did was said, hey, you have to read this book. And he handed me this like 1.5 inch thick book on the grid, basically how electricity works and all the inner workings of the grid, and said, you need to read this. And I'm going to admit right now, I didn't finish it.
Nice.
No one does.
And so even though he doesn't have an engineering degree, even though, he doesn't come from that sort of maybe more scientific place, he definitely understands the underpinnings. And he was having a conversation just the other day with somebody who's in the space who truly didn't know the difference between a kilowatt hour and a kilowatt. And, this is what we're doing every day. So I have to give Chris a lot of credit just for the homework that he put in and the degree that he earned himself. You both are very competitive, I can tell. And I watch Chris all day. He has introduced me, I'm 5'2". I am not a basketball fan, but he had me in the stadium recently for a watch party with the Celtics and going absolutely nuts as they were working their way towards winning it all. And I could see that energy in him at that moment, sort of paralleling his.
I didn't know I was being judged in that moment.
So it's the Celtics for you, Chris. That's where you have all logic escapes you.
Yeah, when my wife knows that I'm stressed, she just puts the Celtics game on, and it de-stresses me. It totally does.
Do you need it? Do you need what do you do in the off season? You have a physical thing? I surf. That's what centers me.
Yeah. So I go to the gym all the time, and I go to Lifetime Fitness, and so the sauna, the steam room, and the sauna are kind of what I do. And I would say on the weekends, we have a place up in Maine, so we go with the family. But we're so turned on during the day, trying to build a business, that when we end this, I'm going to call people all the way home and then hang up on them when I get in my driveway, and then go be dad to 3 little kids.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're doing the same thing right now. So
it's the most important thing. I think you have to leave space on your Google Calendar nowadays for the cutoff to just start being with your kids, because they're here, they're home from camp, or they're home from school, or whatever's going on, and you do need to my wife's actually the one that installed that on my Google Calendar, but I'm thankful that she did it. And then the other Google Calendar standing appointment I have is low tide in Atlantic Beach at 18th Street. And basically it gives me a half an hour window to go peer out. If it's worthwhile, I kind of cut out and do it. It generally lines up with breakfast or lunch. So I always kind of allot myself that much.
So you're a surfer?
Yeah, I hadn't always been. I just picked it up 3 years ago, walked into the surf shop, let the 12-year-old sell me something for too much money, and then went every day.
Yeah.
And it's really fun because you're terrible. Then you become okay. And then you finally, you're oh my goodness, I can actually be pretty good.
Yeah. Those things are awesome. I think for our team, we're all skiers. Mm-hmm. So we love to go ski together in Vermont.
Yeah. What resorts do you like in Vermont?
So they have the Icon Pass and the Epic Pass, right?
Yeah.
So Sugar Bush, right? Sugar Bush. Yep.
Yeah.
So Sugar Bush is Icon, and then Stowe is Epic.
Yeah.
So yeah, we usually do one of those two. Although this year we got the Epic Pass, and because the company was so busy, we didn't go. But I intend. Al, I was saying I want to make that a Friday thing.
We got to make a commitment there. And
yeah,
it's harder for me. I've been spending the winters down in Florida, down in St. Pete, really just trying to be outside more and take advantage of the sun. So my routine around skiing has changed, but maybe we'll have to fit in some trips out west. I don't know.
I think skiing should be I think there should be skiing car events, automotive industry ski events. And I think there should be automotive industry, golf surf events. I think that's where kind of the event pace in automotive should move to, as opposed to the hard sale pitching stuff. I think you can kind of do value props through digital or media nowadays. And I want to find a way to make the events fun.
So John, what's interesting is skiing is actually like one of the biggest challenges in the EV space right now. If you have an electric vehicle.
What? Oh, just the car is not going to start because the temperature?
No. That's not a big deal. Ski resorts are a perfect use case for charging stations because you can plug the car in. It sits there for 12 hours or however long you were skiing. And, if people are staying at a resort, you just plug your car and you're good to go. It's an awesome experience. But in the podcast, we were talking about how this industry is brand new. And so people don't know how to ask the right questions. And so what would you do if you had a gas car, you didn't really care about electric cars, but you were getting requests from some customers? You'd probably go and look for the cheapest charging station. The cheapest charging station is usually a non-networked charging station, which means when you go up to these locations, they'll buy, 3 or 4 chargers. And you might be on 10% on the way up there. And when you get there, because it wasn't a network charger, because you couldn't tell it was working and that it wasn't available, you get to the ski resort and maybe all the stations are in use, or maybe one of the stations is broken, or maybe one of the stations is only charging at 1 kilowatt, even though it was saying that it was working. And it sort of flips your day. And
you almost have to just put that out of your mind, go have a day and just deal with whatever awaits you at 4 p.m.
Well, that's one way to do it.
That's how I do it. I know myself well enough where I can just put myself on Mars and say, well, I'm going to have fun.
And the other thing, to your point, you just made a comment about, we went up to Sunday River in Maine, and all of their chargers were in use. And so this is for the people that don't like EVs. You can tell this story. I got up there and there was 50 miles in my car, 50. And I probably did 3 or 4 hours in runs. And the battery management system in the car was managing the health of the battery. And when I looked at the top of the mountain to see what my battery was, it was 4 miles.
Dang.
So I had to go down to make sure that it didn't die. And then I had to plug in next. I had to take somebody else's plug out of their car, plug it into mine, and then write a letter, a note saying on their dashboard saying, "Hey, I'm so sorry I did this to you. Hopefully you had enough charge, but my car was about to die." And that is where EV is in 2024.
Is there a brotherhood among EV people where you're yeah, I get it, dude. That's fine. Take a little.
Yeah. In the early days, there definitely was. But now that we're getting past the early adopter phase, it starts to feel more normal.
I have a, EVs, they all typically have that all-wheel drive system with the small battery on the rear axle that kind of kicks it a little faster than the differential. For the most part, that's kind of what the all-wheel drive system in an EV is, right?
Say it again.
So in the Toyota EVs, they always threw a smaller motor on the rear axle, like the RAV4 EV or RAV4 Prime. So that system actually had a quicker engagement with the rear axle in terms of engaging as opposed to a classic differential.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good value prop for EVs is the all-wheel drive system was always better.
Yeah. So not an engineer, but that's how they sell it. That's how
I've sold a lot of them that way.
Yeah. The EV has the ability to react in milliseconds, when there's slippage or it needs traction. And so a lot of times they can be really beasts if in snow, especially if you've got snow tires on and you're not just trying to run it with an all season or something. But
and I imagine also the weight of the car is helpful there too.
Definitely.
Yeah. What do you think about the emergency EV, cold weather breaking down on the side of the road and it's cold? How do you get them off the road? How do you clear off that sort of blizzard scenario with EV?
So you're saying worst case scenario where the battery runs out on the side of the road?
Yeah, I did 12 hours one night on I-66 between Tysons and Arlington. It's a 4-mile stretch, but nobody moved. And just popsicle land.
That would have been a good Yossi podcast question. What happened in Chicago?
Yeah.
Look, I'm gonna speak from a Tesla owner's perspective. From a Tesla owner's perspective, if you get caught on the side of the road because your battery ran out, you disobeyed the computer in the center dash. And
gotcha.
Yeah, so it's telling you how much battery you have when you're driving, how much battery you have when you're going to go to the location.
Yeah.
And then when you go to the charger, it charges extra. It doesn't charge for enough for you to get there. So for Tesla's system, it's shame on you.
So it's Hal from Space Odyssey, and he won't let you back in the portal because you've disobeyed.
You nailed it.
I love that. It's like a spiteful AI.
Yeah, and the Chicago story, like everything in life, the truth is usually somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
But the whole thing about the Chicago Tesla supercharger and the car is not working. I remember my family was on a text thread and they're like, Chris, this is why I'm not getting an EV. But the reality there wasn't really, the problem wasn't the technology. I guess some people could argue that's the problem, but I think the biggest problem was education. Like Al and I, who have had an electric vehicle forever, that will never happen to us in that circumstance.
Yeah, you're like seasoned river guides at this point, but I wouldn't know what to do.
We're savvy. It's rare.
That's the industry's problem right now is education. And I think it's almost a little bit convenient that education's not good. Obviously because margins are slim on EVs right now, but education's don't get me wrong, there are other problems for sure, but education's a bigger one than people talk about in the news.
What do you think makes EVs profitable again? How do you do it without kind of the manufacturer stepping in with giant rebates? Because that's a shell game. How do you make them, what's a winning model for EVs?
Yeah, and we talked about this on the podcast a little bit too, but I'm not a huge fan of on the charging side. I am, because it's really necessary, but I think on the vehicle side, because these cars are getting so much better year over year, they're depreciating so fast. And then once you add in the federal tax credit, it's so difficult to lease in this industry right now. The banks are, they're going to lose money under that model. And so, yeah, I think it's above my pay grade how they get the costs lower. Al, I want to dish it off to you in a second, because I'm sure you have some thoughts about this. But I don't I would rather the world to go through the challenge of getting people in EVs at higher price points than the circumstance we've had where price points are fluctuating like crazy, and some people are getting great deals and some people are getting screwed. And at this point, the used car sales market is where it's at.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to add a lot to that in the moment, except, I will say that the goal is to make EVs extremely affordable, right? Everyone talks about the $25,000 car. And the reality is the industry's working really hard to produce that really inexpensive vehicle, whether it comes through a combination of tax credits or not. But, the cost of lithium is dropping pretty rapidly recently, and that's going to be a contributing factor. The cost of manufacturing, or at least the efficiency of the manufacturing lines, is getting better and better. Just the design of the vehicles and the simplicity and the way they're constructed. And I don't want to say simplicity, but I think that they're designing them in a way that will be easier to manufacture and driven by more robotics. So I think there is a lot of pressure to get costs down, price down, and it is challenging when you buy a vehicle and you watch the prices drop around you and you realize you're upside down in your loan and the value of your vehicle. But I do think there's opportunity to sort of course correct over time. And what I am seeing is a lot of these vehicles are they're just lasting longer. I have a 2018 Tesla Model 3 that has 60-something thousand miles on it, but I've done nothing to it. I've had to put almost no money into it.
What about just product itself, where every EV is seemingly buying a new iPad, where everything is touchscreen and all the seats have extra kind of modules on them, forward, backward, side. Things the Tacoma had nothing. The truck had knobs and no power seat. Could you ever just get the adopter to the MVP and then kind of work from there? If you want the EV, you may not, does the EV buyer have to have solely touchscreen experience and Wi-Fi?
That's a good question. And John, I'm going to flip that question back to you in a second because we enjoy technology, Al and I.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine driving a car that had buttons. I haven't done that since 2015.
Dude.
And so for me, like when I get into a car with buttons, it feels really old to me. But like I know they're not building those cars for me.
Right.
They're building it for somebody else. I think like when I get an electric car, there are so many good things about it that the additive piece of technology just feels right to me.
Right.
Whereas some of these electric cars that you see out there, and I'm not hating on them, they're just not my cup of tea. They feel like gas cars that are just driven by an electric motor and have like the better punch.
Uh-huh.
So like what electric car would you get?
What electric car would I get? Some sort of Toyota. I'm just like extremely Toyota loyal. But I always know through selling the Corolla L or kind of like the Camry LE or the vehicles, the affordable vehicle that you really had to communicate to the economic shopper what they have to forego in order to buy a new vehicle. And with Toyota, it was stark. It was like, you don't get a power key. You don't get a power seat. You only get AM, FM, no XM, no sunroof. I mean, damn near no power windows. And that's more the conversation you have with, I think the EV market has to be a little more bold in terms of what it takes away from the like consumer like that in order to achieve affordability. Because if you're perpetually subsidized by tax credit, then you're just going to perpetually undermine your used car value. So like the market has to stand on its own 2 feet one day without rebate from the manufacturer, without subsidy from the government. And then that will ultimately retain the highest resale values.
My guess, John, is like the other challenge for auto manufacturers is I think I've heard, I'm not an expert in this, don't have, the history of 20 years, but that vehicles are in production or are in design until production for about a 7-year period.
Mm-hmm.
And technology is just changing so fast that that's a daunting task to build an electric vehicle that's ready for 7 years from now.
That's tough. I mean, like, and you're right, because you look at what happened to cars as we were heading into COVID and like the chip, there weren't enough chips and, everything, they couldn't give you 2 keys and they couldn't do this and they couldn't do that. But they did kind of produce cars that were missing certain key features.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. And a lot of the cars that are built right now, they don't have like a EV ground up platform. Like a lot of them are, they're built from like their gas counterpart.
Right. Well, wasn't that like Elon's insight when he initially built the Roadster? Was like, oh, I'll save so much money if I just start with the Lotus. And at the end, he was like, I should have just built ground up.
Yeah. I right before COVID hit, there was a Roadster on Carvana or something like that, one of the websites.
I'd buy that. That's neat.
It was $42,000.
Dude, like put that in some sort of like plastic wrap and hide it in your garage for 100 years.
Yeah. The reality was, so I didn't buy it then. COVID hit, and then every Roadster now is like $200,000.
Yeah, in terms of like vehicle curation like that? Like, what is a car that you're really endeared to that may not be like the current cutting edge vehicle, but you look back as kind of like what makes it endearing to you in the way that like a 99 Land Cruiser with low miles and a stick shift would like make me excited. What's that for you?
Yeah. Well, it's a good question because I think like in general, like this new generation doesn't look at cars that way. But for me, I bought a Model S in 2014.
Yeah, so early.
It was so early. It was a rear wheel drive Model S, but it was at that time like, so Al has a Cybertruck, and when Al goes out in public, it's like it's bonkers. Like everyone goes up to him and like it's like this real like marketing thing.
Yeah.
And back in 2014, that's what the Model S was. People would come up and they'd be like, "Wow, look at this! I can't believe it!" And And I, for my career, I lived in Somerville, Massachusetts. At the time, the only fast charger in all of Massachusetts was in Dedham. So I don't know if you're familiar with that, John, but that's probably like without traffic, like 35 minutes, and with traffic, like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And my car had a 230-mile range, not including the 80%, really had probably like a 200-mile range. And so I would have to drive like an hour twice a week just to charge that car. No home charging at that time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Damn, you were uphill both ways.
Totally. I cut my teeth on the EV charging industry by experiencing it in its infancy.
Wow.
In Massachusetts. And yeah, the other interesting one was I don't have any affection for the car, but I have an affection for the experience.
Yeah.
When the Model 3 came out, I had like the VIN number was, I think it was 476, but almost all those went to the West Coast. So I had the third one on the West Coast. And for the first year and a half that Tesla had the Model 3 out, they didn't have it in their showroom because they were just selling them so much that, they didn't have any extra inventory. So the only way that you could test drive the Model 3 from like whenever it was released in 2017 to probably like a little before 2019 was renting out my Model 3 on Turo.
Oh, really?
So that was interesting. People would fly from all over the country to test drive it.
Wow. What weird thing. You should almost like catalog this a little bit, because you were early product adoption, built an expertise in it, and you've been like kind of a guerrilla enthusiast of this. It's really neat.
Yeah. It's also chaotic. I think that, John, the thing that's like not so fun about the EV industry is how politicized it is. That's like the part that that's why I like talking about this utility piece, because it's not political. Everyone wants to save money. So
Right.
It's kind of good to be in the industry but not deal with the politics.
No, that's a nice place like you put yourself in, where you're like, hey, you're a third base coach. You're like, hey, here's kind of what I'm seeing, and this is the direction we should take it in. But you're not kind of like, I like that. That's great.
Yeah. And so question for you, like, you're from the car dealership space. I talk to car dealerships all day long, and we talked about it on the podcast, like what the actual tone is of the industry right now. Like, how do you feel about how things are going? What would you
interesting
change?
where I sit now, because I'm in media. I was a vendor. I was a dealer. Now I'm in kind of like the media of the business, and I look and I talk to dealers all day, and I talk to entrepreneurs all day. And, at first dealers were selling anything as these things rolled out, because there was kind of COVID and there was an increase on everybody, and the EVs were rolling. And then as interest rates came up a little bit and demand got a little tighter, all of a sudden there was like a stark disparity between the two, and the OEMs juiced it with some sort of subvent dollars. And then, it felt like an inflection point in the market where all the dealers were like, do something about it, save us. And then the OEMs kind of like bent the knee to the dealers, were like, yes, we'll do it. But it was very much a short-term fix. And I've heard everything under the sun in terms of like, how do we solve these problems? Even like inverting CSI bonuses to car dealers instead of paying them like for days in stock problems at dealers. In the past 12 months, a few major OEMs have switched from paying per vehicle sold to per vehicle accepted wholesale. So like that's innately speaks to me that there's a problem with product market fit, or you produce too much, or demand planning. I don't know what you did. Pricing's wrong. And then when the manufacturer gave all the money, the dealers beat their chest at how they can sell EVs profitably, because they quit discounting the vehicle, put the rebate there in lieu, larger than the discount, and basically like the net outcome was something lower than it previously was. So like this whole shell game of moving money around, like it has to find its sweet spot. And maybe it's better to find like, I don't think we're at rock bottom. I don't think it's like that bad of a scenario. But EVs are in a value position that ultimately will lead to product adoption, because they're at a price point where like people have to consider that. So a new EV at the Hyundai of St. Augustine store and down here by me, like, you should really consider that. If you're walking the lot, you're looking at everything, you should go look at that EV because it's a pretty good deal. And all of a sudden people are evaluating it from, it's a pretty good deal. And then you're going to get enough people in the seats that I think now you kind of have the runway that you ultimately need.
It's interesting. I saw stats just yesterday about Q2 EV sales, and I was a little surprised, but 330,000 EVs sold, an 11% increase Q2 over last year, and I believe something on the order of a 16% increase or more over Q1 this year.
Wow.
So adoption is there. The trend is up. It is happening. It basically said that, EVs aren't going away.
It was like a canary in the coal mine for me. It was like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, I was door knocking, calling every dealer in the world, trying to sell them something, as I do. And I was talking to a Caribbean dealer, I'm not afraid of any phone call. I'll sell anybody anything. And like, this guy was telling me about all the various brands he has. And he has Daewoo, when you go to Club Med in wherever, what do they pick you up at the airport? And that's what he was running me down. Like Suzuki, Daewoo, and there's like Caribbean brands and obviously Japanese brands in the Caribbean. And then he said, but I've got BYD, man. And he's like, that's all that I care about. This was, I don't know, like 2 years ago or something. He was like, I've got BYD. He's like, I would shut down all my other stores. All I want is BYD. It's all that people want is BYD. And the way he was talking about like the stark contrasted demand between kind of like even what was extreme value, the Daewoo, the Suzuki vans, all those things that you get picked up in the Virgin Islands. He was like, nobody wants those. They all want the inexpensive BYD. And I think that made a lot of sense to me. It's like they're winning because they cost less and the value prop makes a lot of sense. And on its face, the consumer understands it and they will pick that one.
What I'm really curious to see is there's a dealership in Chicago. His name's Adam Jidd. I'm sure he wouldn't mind me using his name. I respect the guy a ton. He came from Iraq. Hopefully I'm messing the story up, but he came from Iraq. He came to the United States and obviously valued like the freedom of the United States and started a dealership in a dealership group in the United States. He owns a couple dealerships in the Middle East. He owns a couple dealerships in Asia. And he was showing me like some of these electric cars that are being made in these other regions. They are just so advanced. He showed me a car that I would say was equivalent to like a Model S. It asked me, how much do you think this costs? And he forget the number exactly, but it was like lower than $20,000 US dollars. And so, the thing that I'm like most concerned about is that China's doing EV really well. The population knows that it's a superior vehicle. And from an infrastructure perspective, they're more focused on it. Obviously, from a clean energy perspective, like they're locked into their clean energy initiatives over there. And I just fear that that market will get so far ahead of the U.S. market in terms of like quality of product and cost that that they could control a lot of the marketplace in the future.
Yeah, reports are that they have achieved it because their sales volume there is America's like pretty far trailing, and then their production has also surpassed us. So it's kind of like, everybody here has a lot of pride in America, as we all do. We have to come to terms that we're at a kind of like the bad side of the leverage point. Like the manufacturing and even the product expertise kind of sits abroad. And then how do we fight and win? Because like you should compete, you shouldn't back down. We have like the American middle class consumer is the most important group of people to sell anything to in the world. And like that'll probably ring true for the next like 50 years. And that's depending upon the rising kind of like lower middle class of India and the lower middle class of China. But in the meantime, like every product in the world should be geared towards the American middle class. And that'll probably be like the oddest thing in our lifetime if we just see every product abroad no longer built explicitly for kind of like the American middle class person.
Yeah, and obviously we can just feel it here because it's such a high costing product right now that you can see the difference between there's an inflection point that was hit in Asia because they're taking it they're doing it a certain way that inflection point hasn't necessarily hit here. I would say Europe's a few years ahead of us.
I think that like we should kind of let BYD and VinFast kick us in the teeth a little bit, because otherwise we're just kind of postponing our own demise. And it's in the meantime, what are we doing? So it's like, are we scrambling the jets to build the inexpensive option that obviously would kill? The internet went viral for the $10,000 Toyota truck. Everybody said, "Oh yeah, one please. I'll take 4 of those and I'll put it at like each one of my houses." But we're not allowed to have that. For the kind of the same thing you just said. There's some sort of $20,000 Model S in Saudi Arabia. We're not allowed to have that. So like the American consumer yearns for the same thing these other people have, and it would solve a lot of the problems. But kind of how do we get it? I'm fine if the tariffs and kind of like excluding BYD and VinFast are a very temporary measure that kind of allowed us to catch up, but I don't think it has. I think we're still going to produce the damn near Gucci EV until we can continue to like achieve margin. We're chasing margin. And then historically, if you look back on what Honda, Nissan, and Toyota did in order to penetrate the American market, they came with the economic vehicle and the $59.99 truck that they imported without back seats. And they made the stick shift 4-cylinder that barely got over 60 miles an hour, but like lived forever. And I think that's more the comp that we're looking at. And it's like, how do we become more like them? And how do we like get there faster and win there?
Yeah, a gentleman said to me, and I so this isn't my thought, but he said it and just kind of clicked, is like, I think like right now what's happening is like back in the day, different makes and models of vehicles were like a fashion statement. They represented to people who they were. They said something about you, and somebody could tell the difference between one German brand versus another German brand. I think what we're seeing right now in electrification is, the need to personalize as it relates to your vehicle is changing with the new generation.
What do you even mean? How do you personalize?
I think the difference between brands is less appreciated in 2024 with Gen Z, and there will be consolidation of brands where the younger generation is more focused on how do I get to point A to point B. And look, I'm not an expert in that generation, but obviously everyone wants like some version of individualism, but I don't think that comes out in cars anymore.
Yeah, you're right.
I'm going to say this just because I wrapped the Cybertruck. I personally did it because I had this idea in my head, and I wanted to do a wrap that emulated the SpaceX Starship heat tiles, these hexagonal heat tiles. And at first I wasn't sure because I really loved the stainless look on the Cybertruck, so unique and so interesting. But I very quickly realized that it's hard to keep fingerprints off it, and I did want an individualized look, and so we wrapped it.
What a great manufacturing insight. Just make the monospec because the consumer will personalize.
Yeah. And as I watch what we did, as I look around me, I'm seeing people personalizing Cybertrucks left and right. I saw Cleveland Browns wrap the other day.
Did you?
Oh, yeah.
That's probably the car you would pick to personalize.
Yeah. Right.
To your point, John.
But Chris, do you Do the dealers pick up? That's such a good insight because, the old like rust and dust aftermarket people, they're always looking for something to sell. And if you can paint the picture to a dealer that an EV customer is here to personalize their vehicle and they buy that stuff at a higher rate than other people, and here's the 10 easiest things you can sell at the dealership in terms of wraps and this and like list it off and educate them on it, you can start painting a profitability picture.
You know what I would say is I don't think EV drivers are looking to I think it's the opposite. I just think that people that are looking to personalize their cars are getting specifically a Cybertruck because it is very wrappable.
Gotcha. Rolling, cool, wrappable car.
Yeah. Like, it's very rare that I can't even name a time where, I'll talk to the older generation and they think the cars, I have a Model X, so it has the Falcon doors. It looked really cool 5 years ago, but I think people are getting more used to it. So it's definitely more standard now, but it has Falcon doors. I'd say the older generation, when they see the Falcon, people are like, whoa, look at that. And then I have like little cousins that could care less that the door has Falcon wing doors. Like they don't even notice when they get in the car. I'm like, do you notice that it just went up like that?
How interesting.
Yeah. And I don't know. It's just like, I think in general with, like I said to Yossi, I think the stitching on the steering wheel is becoming less and less important.
I look at cars in such a different way because I was just trained to buy cars for the lot. And then I got a demo. So I had a demo. And like buying a car like repulses me. I'm like, I can't believe I have to put myself through this. Not that the experience is bad, but like the fact that I have to pay for a car, I'm like, it doesn't make sense. Somebody should have given me a car. And then like what I get excited about are kind of like consumer vehicles with low miles that are in really good shape. Like I get so excited when somebody has like a 10-year-old 4Runner that doesn't have any rust on it and it's got like 14,000 miles.
I want to be that guy. That's who I want to be. That person's my hero.
Oh yeah, man. Like I drive, an old 2018 Highlander with like 80,000 miles and I could like care less. It's got like, something, my sprinklers like spraying something terrible on the bumper. I think it's like green or brown. I don't even know what it is. And like, I'll hang out with car dealers and they all make fun of it. And they're like, oh, I could help you with that, John. And I'm like, you could not. You couldn't trade me out of this if you tried. But I think that's a little bit of like, that was common to like Toyota general managers is we all kind of like, we were there because we saw vehicles retaining value. And then we were good at operating stores because we could like identify vehicles that retain value. And then we can't wash it off of ourselves.
It's the Wild West on this side of the business. It sounds like you have it really dialed in on the gas side. Like we're still figuring it out on this end.
Yeah, but I like the idea of all the aftermarket stuff that dealers need to be like prepared for.
There's other things too. Like I know dealers don't like to use their locations as like public fueling locations, but like I've always been curious, like if you're a dealer and so Tesla just offered me in March, they offered me full self-driving, which I know it's not perfect. And that's what people would say. And good point taken. But they offered me unlimited supercharging on any car for the lifetime that I use the car.
Wow.
And so,
because do you think that had something to do with your customer lifetime value, Chris? Because you are like, that's Gen Pop offering. No, that's not Amex Platinum.
It's not.
Whoa.
It's a networked offering. Cool. It's what having a networked circumstance allows you to do. Right. And that's what electric cars are generally. They're networked. And so they have like this competitive. So most of the auto manufacturers today, they have deals with Electrify America, EVgo, some of these asset owners of fast charging networks across the US to give away charging for free for the beginning of the vehicle. And Tesla obviously does it. You know when Tesla does it? 3 days before the quarter ends,
Really?
They're calling everybody, hey, who wants unlimited charging? And so if I'm a dealership I'm thinking, how can I respond to the person that comes and says, well, Tesla's going to give me this. What do you have?
You know what that's the equivalent of? That's the equivalent of the iPhone upgrade that we've got your trade-in value ready for you. That's the exact same thing.
Yeah.
What does the car dealership have for you? Buddy. I mean, it's kind of like Toyotathon. You got kind of like the annual sales events. You have things like that, but then they're not even differentiated enough. New product releases get people excited. The 4Runner, the Land Cruiser, like, God forbid a new F-150 comes out, people like break glass to go get it. But I don't think anything outside of like a new product release that's really interesting about like lifetime charging like that. I mean, that's a market advantage in terms of, the demand button.
And I think like at the beginning, like the way Tesla marketed it was like, well, why would you want to go to a dealer? Because you don't want to haggle, right? Like that was like their sales pitch for the direct model. But what Tesla's done is they've changed their pricing so much that instead of like allowing each person to haggle, they've put them in a position like you have like that Toyota Spring Savings event, and people are saving a little money. They're going to the locations. There might be a little bit of negotiation, but the way this like direct sales model has played out, at least for Tesla, is you might buy a car, and then this happened with the S and the X. Was like there was a period of time where I think I bought my car for like $81,000, and then over a year-long period, it increased to $85,000, $95,000, $105,000, the standard price for everybody. And then suddenly they brought the price point right back down to where I bought it. And so I think it's a little bit ironic because like, yes, people didn't have to haggle.
Yeah.
But they got the price change on them so dramatically that they ended up in the same bad position they would have been in if they got, haggled with at a dealership.
That's macro haggling. I like it. Centralized haggling. But
yeah,
how could you capitalize at EV Ready off of, like you just stated a market advantage that Tesla has over classic OEMs because they can reach out and touch consumers and offer this captive charging, which is, free charging thing, which is like such a retention play. And it's such a customer lifetime. Like you could identify the most valuable customers through a CDP or some sort of marketing engineering device nowadays, where you can identify somebody who's worth, 10x the standard customer. And then you could extend to them some sort of like retention play like that. How could you set up charging among a regional dealer group like Coons? Let's say Coons, or like, how do you then use it as like credit card points to get them to keep returning it's valid at any Coons location. Just continue to live in Baltimore or DC and you're good to go.
I view this topic as a way to dealers to sink their teeth into, and I don't think dealers are as concerned as this as they were like 3 or 4 years ago when like everyone's like direct sales is the future. But I think this component of the business is a way where dealers can add additional control within their hands for their future. What do I mean by that? I'm not going to say who the dealer group would be, but let's just say you're a dealer group who has 300 locations across the United States. Where
there's 3 choices there.
All right, let's go with 100. Let's go with 100. Let's go. Yeah, now you can pick from 15, whatever it is. So what if you said, okay, by the way, the auto manufacturers are forcing you to install these chargers, right? They're literally forcing you. Not all funding in the United States requires public charging, but a lot of it, you get more funding if you make the stations available to the public. So not only can you reduce your capital investment in what you're required to be doing, what you can do is you can say to your customers, hey, we're going to brand these XYZ, let's call it Coons Automotive Group, so that the stations look like Coons, but they're on like a public charging network that people can see, which means they're going into the center dash of the vehicle. And then what I always used to do is get dealers to put a QR code on the station so that they could sign people up to their loyalty program so that they get access to the customer's data.
Yeah.
And I would say, tell customers, look, I'm going to charge you to charge. You can use this as a fueling station if you want to. But for certain VINs on our lot that are higher margin, you can use the credits from your charging towards a future vehicle purchase. And then what you can do is you can create an app, or if you want, put it on your website. But I would say create an app, or that's probably the best way to get your brand out there. Where you can build a network that's branded Dealer Group XYZ's regional charging network. And then if you had like a lot of different dealer groups that are close to each other, you could create partnerships between dealer groups where dealerships and dealer groups could build hypothetically a regional or a nationwide fast charging network.
Yeah. I mean, just imagine, due to the fact that you have a fast charging network, you're probably going to have some sort of app that identifies where they're located. You probably push messages to everybody. You could, put your whole service record history on there and maybe communicate directly with both sales and service. That'd be a cool little retention play.
Yeah, and then use the communication between the vehicle, between the charging station, between somebody's phone, to go sell those higher margin services that really help you make your bottom line at each location. And it's really interesting because you see some dealerships are putting in gyms. I've seen some put in restaurants or cafes.
Yeah.
From my perspective, and I could be wrong, I'm sure car dealerships, I know they are because I've talked to, so many about them, are like, I'll never do anything like that. But I think there's a retail play tied to selling kilowatt hours and more vehicles, that when you have like a larger dealer group, you can create a certain experience that is unique. And I always tell people, go capitalize on it right now, because you're being forced to buy chargers.
Do you think that's the future of your company a little bit, is like handing over that like premium playbook, or handing over that app? I mean, I know you're handing over the premium playbook, but also like the 7 steps beyond that.
It could be. It all kind of depends on where this chaotic moving target moves to.
Yeah, I know how you feel.
We don't want to come in like a bat out of hell, talking to end users, telling them like, hey, this is the future, because the reality is like, we think we know, but we don't exactly know. And so what we try and arm people with is, hey, and it's the perfect use case is car dealers. Like, hey, you're being forced to spend $1 million. Let's do it this way instead of that way. And it'll give you more flexibility to participate in more business models in the future.
Yeah, no, I think you got something.
I want to, we're getting down to the end of it, and I just want to make sure that we have touched on sort of your current role, your, the scene at Car Dealership Guy. You guys have something really special going on, and I love the energy that you and Yossi sort of put forth, and the experience that you have in the automotive industry. And it's very palpable that you understand it ever so clearly. And I do consider you both experts, and I'm glad you're out there building the entity that you are. But I would love for you to just describe your role and how you see Car Dealership Guy today, because I know you're evolving. I'm seeing some new products, if you will, coming from you out there. And I'd love for you to just like talk about that for a few.
So Yossi and I started working together kind of on what could this be? And again, like, didn't want to be a bat out of hell, but I guess we are kind of like a danger to ourselves and others when we kind of like bring a product to market, and then we immediately call somebody about it. And then we look at each other, oh, they bought it. What do we do? But like, we've had so much fun. And in doing that, in the early days of doing that, we've found kind of like predictable results. And we've found what the market likes and what the market doesn't like. And I suppose we help people in the automotive space communicate to dealers, and we help dealers kind of share best practices. And ultimately, it boils down to, can you provide insights to this audience? And we really like doing everything at kind of a free or ungated experience. And so whether we're publishing a news website or we're investing in actual reporters, we don't have an AI news team. I think that's really cool. We have like reporters that talk to people and like chase down ideas and iterate. And I'm not allowed to talk to them because I'm the sales guy. So it's like, it's an interesting thing. And then, what becomes of this is like, Yossi and I really hit on product market fit for a business facing creator. So we were able to take Car Dealership Guy, and I remember looking at each other like, what is this business? And he said, it's a media business. And I said, oh my God, I think I agree with you. And then like it's easy to say barstool love, like you hear that a lot and it's just not true with anything. And like, it's not true with Car Dealership Guy, but it's like insight driven B2B platform that provides value. And then we've been able to recreate product market fit with other insight driven influencers. And like one of the most fun things I've ever done in my entire life is working with Russ Flips Whips, who's this guy in Pittsburgh who works in Lincoln store, and he makes educational and satirical videos about being a car salesman. And he's doing 90 million impressions on social media every month. And he has a giant dealership audience. So I get to work with this guy, and we approach brands with ideas, and they go, "Are you sure that's going to work?" We go, "Yes." And like, it has. I mean, and then suddenly Russ has this big business. We've done it for these other people. We're signing automotive talent now. And I find that really fun. And like Russ, we even did this really cool dealership sales training in Rohrman. So in Indiana, Russ and I flew out to Indiana, and we trained their sales team on how to build an audience on social media, then how to leverage it into selling cars. And we left behind a couple employees there that are getting like 1 million views on their TikToks right now. And the value initially was kind of like Russ gets to be in their videos, or they get to do this or that, but they got exposure to how he cuts content, how he makes it. And I mean, we're looking at each other. We're like, this has been the most fun we've ever had. And it's been a different sort of training that the people were really engaged and they loved it. So now Russ and I are like, what do we take this on the road? How do we deliver it remotely? What are we going to zoom into people? So we have like this product on our hands that we created something that like people loved. And now how far do we go with it?
Jon, it's awesome. I know Al and I knew about you guys before we, collaborated with you. And Al sends me your tweets. I get whatever they're called now, like once or twice a week. And he's been doing it for, I don't know, a year and a half now. But it's always like great data and insight. And I just think like, the way you guys are approaching it is so genuine. The industry needs you. That's for sure.
Yeah, we've been really fortunate, and we've been supported by dealers and people in the vendor ecosystem. And it's the best business to be a part of. And, so thankful. I mean, we do optimize for insight, and really the insight we're trying to provide is like, do dealers find this useful? Can this help them operate their business better?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's been nothing short of amazing to be engaged with you and Yossi and like see you in your element, but like directly involved instead of just reading about it all on X or Instagram or anywhere else, or watching on YouTube. So, it's just been fun to be in the game with you. And I know
the same way about EV Ready. You guys are a close-knit team. You're building something, and it's amazing. Like, you really are insightful, and you're solving big problems. I really have a lot of faith that like your value prop as an organization has so much, like it's going to go so far.
Thank you.
That's the plan. We want to solve a large problem. I think right now, dealerships are the most affected customer in the world. Then it's going to be other verticals, but everyone's going to have to solve this problem for electrification at Pencil.
Yeah, totally agree.
All right, man. Well, thank you for your time. I really appreciate your coming on. It went fast. We could have talked about 1 million subjects. I think we covered like 10. So we may have to do a redux of this and spin it up again.
Excellent. Thank you both for having me on.
Thanks, Jon.
Thanks, Ben.
See ya.